What's going on, creators? Yeah, I just want to get on here and bring everybody back to now. Appreciate y'all being here and vibing with me for a bit. Yeah, today I like to continue just the conversation on mental diets and hopefully add something positive to your mental diet for today. You got a couple things wrote down here in the old agenda. Most importantly is just kind of the same kind of flow's been going on, is just accepting the day as it unfolds, not like getting in a bunch of resistance about how things are unfolding, because so much of the resistance is coming from like a past interpretation of like, oh, something's different, so that must mean, a disaster. It's like when you get like something going on with your body, it's more than likely probably like a neutral thing or something just passing, coming and going type thing, to immediately start reacting out of fear, getting on like WebMD and just like worst case scenarios and start planning your own funeral, type thing, but like, more than likely, you'll be fine. It's just kind of that reactivity, yeah, and stepping away from that reactivity is important. Sometimes you can get that reactivity when you get exposed to something from like the world, and some media that's like, oh, hysterical or fearful or worst case scenario, something that's like promoting the illusion of separation, is a manifestation of the old mind. But ultimately, letting go of those kinds of illusions is important. And I think one of the bigger ways to pass through these types of maybe fear barriers, resistance, blocks, whatever you want to call these things, is to just stand in faith, to just go for it anyway. And you start to see the pattern emerge over and over again through demonstrating that, where you're just like, I've experienced it personally, like through like the handyman business, the music business, just like going out on your own, pursuing that kind of way to make a living. I guess the entrepreneurial path, I guess. Path of like creating your own income, creating your own business, creating your own lifestyle type thing. And so much of that is through this repetition, seeing that God provides. It makes makes a lot of the efforting and the fear really subside, and as you realize the only thing you have to really master is this inner conversation, these inner beliefs and these assumptions, because as you do so, I don't know if it's like you call it, your subconscious mind starts to project that out into your perception of reality. But regardless, it's like the world that you'll experience is a different reality than your old inner beliefs and assumptions perception of reality was. So it's like the more that you change these beliefs, drop these limiting beliefs, let go of these things. It's like as a kid would just put down an old toy that just doesn't serve anything anymore. It just doesn't. All it's doing is creating needless suffering, these loops of just the same old shit that's not working, these insanity loops. It's like, well, maybe if I double down and this time it'll be different. That's kind of the a red flag that you're listening to the wrong guide. When you're habitually going to what didn't work in the past, but if you just double down just a little bit more, this time, then it'll be okay. And there's nothing wrong with growing and evolving either. It's kind of just how your inner being is kind of relating to these things. If you're looking at it as a reflection of like maybe the kingdom of God, for example, that's one thing. As an example of oneness, of unity, of like God's promises being true. That's one thing. But if you're looking through the old mind of like there's all these separate forces and separate wills and there's all this separate shit going on. There's the will of the body and the will of man and the will of nature and the will of all these separateness, and it's like even like money is a good example, where it talks about like the root of all evil, and if you keep evil and the idea of separateness kind of together, things start to make more sense. And even the idea of evil, being just another label for fear, is also helpful, and so like scarcity beliefs about money, also looking at money as though it's separate from God somehow. That's another aspect of like limiting beliefs that can start to come up when it comes to like the world. I don't know what you call it. Just like the physical world, the world of form. And really kind of shaking loose a lot of these concepts that the physical world has some inherently negative about it, some wrongness, something that needs conquered. Really, it's just more about realizing that God's been in control of the world the whole time. As much as people don't want to really hear that, they want to blame everything on, some separate forces. Oh, I'm a victim. It's the they that did it. Even though, so much of like the quote unquote they that's victimizing, whatever's not to say they aren't predatory people, but so much of it is a result of consciousness, and experiencing these loops of consciousness, and so much about fear that people unconsciously don't realize is the things that you fear, your belief in these separate forces then draws that shit to you like a magnet. And so many times, it's like your fears manifest over and over again, instead of your desires manifesting, which you're desiring is basically just love, heaven, connectedness with God, and so many, of the physical symbols, just kind of represent that, but when you're kind of dealing with fear, which is ultimately an absence of love, you think of it like a minus sign, it's an illusion in that way, because ultimately only God is real. You can create illusions though, and so much of what we create is just illusions that just freak us out, and then we believe them even more. So like a good example of that is like the old mind was saturated with scarcity beliefs, and that's beyond just scarcity beliefs of like money is like one example, but then there's not enough time, there's not enough love to go around, there's not enough friends, there's not enough people that are awake, there's this not enoughness, there's just, oh, it's scarce, it's just everything in like like physical reality is based on relationship, and it's like we can have a relationship maybe with me and you, but then you can also have a relationship with your body, with your family, with your wife, with your job, with your all of these things. You're in a relationship because there's only one force. All of these things are just manifesting in different I don't know how to describe it. It's just different ways, but it's ultimately expressing the one consciousness, if that makes sense. But like part of this old mind of separateness, that's always recreating the past and like creating a prison, for your own mind, because what happens is you get like something that you feared then manifested, which then makes you feel like you're justified in having that fear, which then makes you double down on it, then believe that that's real. And guess what happens? Your beliefs and your assumptions then start to be mirrored out in your perception of reality, and you believe it more and more so as this mind tries to convince you that you're a separate brain and a body that's separate from everything. You're separate from people, separate from circumstances, separate from everything, which ultimately is not real. I mean, that's not how reality functions, but like you can experience that illusion, so on some level, I guess it's, it's a thing, but like ultimately it has no bearing on like actual reality, but you can continuously create, and that's the problem, is that we do that unconsciously. We don't want our fears to come upon us. But like when you're in this kind of mindset where you feel like a victim and you feel separate from God and separate from people and separate from everything, it's just like you have an absence of like, it's like you walked away from the source, or you pinched it off, and then as you believe, so it's done unto you. And so it's like so many times, it's just you're getting these feedback loops of just fear manifesting, and it's like, see, I believe it even more because it keeps happening and it keeps happening, not making the connection that it's happening because of these inner conversations and beliefs, and it's happening because you're listening to the wrong guide that always creates chaos, and always creates more and more fear, like a magnet, which fear is just basically you have love over here, which is the only thing that is actually real. Then you have fear, which is ultimately the absence of love, which has torment and suffering attached to it. And when you start to really think about, like the nature of God and God's will, when the Bible talks about how it's like God's good pleasure, it brings God pleasure to give you the kingdom. It also says in the Bible, God takes pleasure in prospering you. Wouldn't it also make logical sense that it displeases God to see you suffering? Yet so much of the old mindset is based on this idea that you inherently need to suffer continuously in the present moment, because it believes that there's this future payday as a result. So it's like spending the present moment, which is the only time that's real. Ask somebody in heaven what time it is, and they'd say now. It's still now. It's eternal. It's not tick 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 in a line. It goes in circles. And so this idea that that you're going to suffer today for some magical you made it moment tomorrow is an illusion that keeps you stuck in a cycle of suffering. So it's like the more that you can embody the promises of God that are true now, that you are already blessed with everything, that you are connected with God, that basically everything that you desire in this idea that the old mind has of heaven as being some separate place where God's in complete control of that. But so for some reason in the physical world, it's just chaos and fucking suffering and torment, virtually like a manifestation of hell. It's like, well, God's not in control of this world, but and then in heaven, God's in complete control, which doesn't make any sense, but it's part of like this old mindset of this, where it's like, well, then I just need to continue to suffer endlessly now. And I think a lot of that comes from just like people's relationship with Jesus. It's like you can connect with Jesus that was in a body, that was like crucified and suffered and everything else, which is, fine, but your new identity is one with the living Christ, the resurrected Christ, the one that's alive now, that's with you now, that relationship. And that's part of moving from this old identity where you are suffering, along with Jesus in body, moving, into the resurrected Jesus in spirit and the timeless in heaven, and experiencing that oneness now, because as you believe in like, just like the promises of God being true, the more you see that reflected out into your life, into your day, into your present moment awareness. And like the more that you connect with that kind of the living Christ, the spirit, I don't know, these are just labels, but it's something tangible, experiential, that you can, for one, feel that presence now. It's like as you desire to, then your faith is rewarded. So it's like it's really important to start putting your faith into these concepts and shifting your identity from the old you, which was like, believed it was a brain and a body and separate from everything, to, and ultimately on the cross, nailed up with Jesus, to letting that old identity be, crucified, and embracing your new identity, which is, who you are in Christ now, that's already been blessed, and so it's like, everything that you have imagined like heaven would be like, joy, basically, all the fruits of the spirit, God being in control, you don't got to worry about things, and all this efforting and struggling and striving, realizing that God has done this process for you, that is by grace that you're saved, not your efforting and your work and your, the shit that you're doing with your body, that kind of stuff is like, the Bible says that it doesn't please God, so it's like, it says what does is your faith. And so it's like important to continue to move in the faith that, you've already been blessed with everything that you've desired. It's a realization that that's the reality of the situation, and as you believe that, then you start to see that being mirrored more and more so. And and that kind of leads to actual demonstration of your faith. It's one thing, to just have like the inner beliefs and the assumptions, and you can feel, however you want to feel. I mean, you can put on that energy, now. Of complete abundance. It's just like, because what's true for God is part of your inheritance that you get to experience because you're connected with God, if that makes sense. So it's like, all these illusions of scarcity, you can easily start to reject those, and as you do, you can start to put on abundance instead. This is basically operating without a state of fear. So much of scarcity is, feeling like there's not enough. And so it's like you don't want to give to others, even though we're all connected. So as you give to others, you're actually giving to yourself multiplied. It multiplies and comes back to you. Part of like, you just don't believe that, because you believe scarcity is real. And so it's like you feel like as you give, you lose. Instead of as you give, you get it multiplied and it comes back. It's like as you teach, you learn. So it's almost like, oh, you want to keep, kind of like sharing these things, because as you do, you get more enlightened. And then that just kind of just keeps building. It's like an expanding and growing. And so it's like, yeah, it's easy to kind of mentally almost like imagine, and it almost feels like daydreaming kind of. But it's another when you're actually starting to demonstrate it in your life, because that's so much of what you're doing is you're expressing in form love. And part of love is abundance. And, as you express that inwardly, externally, God will start bringing this stuff to you, different opportunities, and it's all based on what you believe is possible. So if you have like, oh, I believe you can only make money through going to a 9 to 5 type thing. I mean, that's you're putting the limits on it. So it's like if soon as, and that's just a limiting belief. As a person who doesn't believe, oh, he's signaling, but as a person that doesn't believe that, that and has, it's proven that through demonstrations, through like having a business and being not having a boss for years, and everything's taken care of, and all that kind of stuff, then it's just growing in that demonstration. It's the same thing with like all these different areas. It's like as you believe these things are possible, that opens the door, to then start to experience that and demonstrate that physically in form. And that's something to start to realize that, and keeping the fact that God does the work front and center. It's like you don't got to do the work for your heart to beat. It just does. It's like you don't have to do the work for the opportunities to come to you. You just have to do what your faith allows you to do when it's presented to you. And if you feel fear, realize that, oh, this is an opportunity to experience your new identity, because your new identity is not fear. And so if you're feeling fear or feeling like worry, concern, a lot of the attributes of like the old mindset of separation, it's easy enough to hand that over to God and just ask God, thank God that the problem's solved. So part of it is realizing that the problem and the solution comes at the same time. And when it comes at the same time, handling that differently, where in the past you maybe start to drift into fear, and then oh shit, next thing you know, something's manifesting. It's oh, my worst case scenario, my fear's manifesting. Then it's like, oh, how many times does that got to go on before you realize I could have a contrary thought, and that will manifest just the same. It's like, why am I keep freaking out that I'm having thoughts that are based in error, and then that error starts to manifest? Well, then I'll just change the thought to align to truth, and then the truth will manifest instead. And I never have to have this concern of fear manifesting, because it's ultimately all within anyway. And so it's like it's as a process of realizations, but then has a demonstration that's attached to that spiritual roots, and so, I encourage everybody to kind of put those things on, put it to the test for yourself so you can see it in action. And as you do, whatever God's put in your radar or heart or whatever you want to call this, to pursue, start to do it. There is no limit. With God, all things are possible, and God's the one doing the work. And so it's like the faster that you move your faith from fear, which is basically believing in multiple wills and forces, to aligning more to, this is God's will playing out. I don't got to worry about it. I don't got to be in fear about it. Part of it is just having your mind renewed into some of the promises of God, which I like to listen to. You can type it into YouTube just the same. Just type promises of God, and they got like multiple videos with like Bible verses that talk about like stuff like this, and it's just as a process of just believing that that's the reality now, not later, not some magical you made it moment, but that God's in control of heaven and earth and creation and everything else now, and there's laws and it's not just random chaos, which brings a lot of like peace to like why do good things happen to bad, or what do bad things happen to good people? And it's like, well, we don't know what's going on within people, but like more than likely it's their inner conversations. And if it was fearful, and that could be like hard to hear, a lot of people don't want to take responsibility for their thoughts and their inner world, but so much of what happens to people is a direct result from their beliefs and their conversations. And unfortunately, so many of those in the old mindset are just creating unconsciously, because you're always doing this regardless of whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously. It doesn't matter, you're still doing it. And the problem is like the people that are doing it unconsciously a lot of the times are unconsciously creating fear that is then manifesting unconsciously in their day-to-day lives, which is causing suffering and torment. And then it spirals, it just keeps spiraling, and so, and people can do that if they want. I mean, if you love suffering so much, but, realizing that there's an alternative that involves like, only changing your mind and just, it becomes like retarded to like, oh, what? Let me just continue just to suffer for a while. It's like, well, how long you plan on spending the present moment doing that? Because it's still now. The only time you're suffering is now. It's not tomorrow. So it's like you can choose to suffer unconsciously, by manifesting more and more fucking shit for yourself to deal with. Or you can like seek the kingdom of God and God's righteousness, and as that inner reality starts to become reflected into your day to day, experiencing more and more glory to glory to glory. Things getting better and better and better and better every day. It's almost like you're looking at a reflection, like through a cloudy, steamed up glass. That as your faith is aligning more and more to the truth, is being able to see clearer and clearer and clearer, and getting out of these illusions of the world. It's so many times, if I had to stop watching a lot of truth channels, because it's the same shit as the world, only just, I'm just going to react to this more than likely made up hysterical shit anyway, that's not even representing anything other than gossip. Gossip and manipulation and propaganda and fucking horse shit. And it's just like, well, let's get to the bottom of the propaganda. It's like, no, you just stop fucking paying attention to it. It's like you are empowering it with your attention. So you must really enjoy the creation of it then, because you are co-creating that drama and that fucking nightmare just as much as anybody else in the world's doing, and it's all most of it's going on unconsciously. Most people don't realize they're creating the hell for themselves, And that includes people in the truth community, which are doing it at a much higher scale, because their attention on this shit is just turning their fucking perception into a true, like a satanic Truman show. Which I get it, I've experienced that too. But you don't got to continuously live in this kind of fucking nightmare, that is just going downhill, which is causing more and more suffering. And it's like, it's as easy as doing one of these, like, click, I'm done feeding that. I'm done being part of that pendulum. And it doesn't matter if it's CNN, Fox News, Infowars, Breitbart, fucking Washington Post, New York, any of these fucking, none of it. It's like you keep focusing on your attention and believing that that's real when it's not the reality. It's just upside down and backwards, and it's like sitting there. Well, they lied here, and then they lied here, and then we need to get this to. It's like the world will change as you change. That's how powerful you are. So it's like believing that you're some victim that needs to effort and do these different things to change the world. It's like you change yourself, and the world will mirror that reflection back to you, and you can start testing that, and you'll see that for yourself. And I encourage you to do that, and get out of this suffering, I'm a victim kind of mentality. If people in the world want to kind of participate in that for whatever reason, that has no bearing on what's going on with you. And so be the change, be like the heaven on earth example, I guess. And you'll see that reflecting more and more so in your life. You'll see God's synchronicities and the way these things just start connecting. That would be normal. That is normal, miracles and, seeing all these miraculous things come together, and miracle healings and all this kind of shit that was like, doesn't make any medical sense. It's just like, that's just normal. That can be your normal. But like, but you have to be the one that makes that change and that decision, and put forth the effort to not listen to the guide of fear, and instead listen to the Holy Spirit, which is within you, and brings you peace and joy, and a different outlook on different situations. And so with that being said, I think I'm gonna bounce. Thanks to everybody for liking, sharing, subscribing, all the social networking things. I also appreciate your spiritual support and your financial support. Thank you for that. And until the next now, God bless.